There are 7 incredibly fun Warlock builds you need to try. Each one involves a specific exotic and subclass that's synergized for gameplay loops that are so fun to play. I'm going to break down exactly how they work and provide you with a mod summary at each stage so that you can apply it on your end, and we're going to kick things off with the Void subclass running the Contraverse Hold Gauntlets. These have been an endgame staple in Destiny for a long time, and for good reason. They're incredibly straightforward and very powerful. You charge a grenade, throw it at a big target, and you'll get a buff that starts giving the nade right back as it deals damage. We pair it with the Echo of Expulsion fragment so that everyone you kill with it explodes. Take out one tankier enemy and the rest will go with it. We then have the Feed the Void aspect working in tandem so that every ability kill you get is also giving you a buff called Devour. What is Devour? Well, simply put, it gives you instant full health on every single kill as well as more grenade energy. The timer extends with every one of those kills, but also by picking up an orb, so the synergy is incredible for survivability. You throw one Vortex grenade and you're getting the regen buffs from Contraverse, but also Devour at the same time. Going one step further, we combine that with a grenade kickstart mod on your arms to make sure that you never run out, because those give you energy back right on the grenade throw. Now, because this build is all around grenade spam, you're going to be using ashes to assets on your helmet to give you way more super on all of those kills, as well as firepower on your arms to create a bunch of orbs while you're at it. Something really nice about this build, especially in endgame content, is the fact that while you're charging your grenade, during that animation you have an extra 20% damage resistance. The cycle is pretty seamless, but what happens if you don't have your grenade? That's where the rest of your mods have that gap covered. Running Bomber will give you grenade back when you place down a rift. Then running mods like Innervation and Restoration make sure that when you're picking up orbs, you're getting even more grenade back. With respect to weapons, because our grenades are all about crowd control, we can double down on that. Witherhoard is a popular choice, but grenade launchers with the Disorienting Grenades perk is really nice because it blinds them as well. Your second and third slots would be having something high damage with range like rockets or linear fusion rifles, and then anything that's mid-range like a regular fusion rifle. Bonus perks for this setup would be something like Demolitionist for more grenades, and then Shoot to Loot, which is incredible for refreshing Devour by simply shooting orbs. The exotic truly makes for an easy build that you can hop on at any time and play pretty well any activity with. This is my current mod setup, but I've also provided custom dim links if you're comfortable using those. Moving on to build number 2, we're sticking with the Void subclass, but now with a different style of play using this ugly bucket. Don't let looks deceive you. Verity's Brow is probably one of the most powerful exotics that Warlocks have. We're going back to grenades again, but while the last build was all about area control, this one revolves around key weapon synergy and buffing the heck out of your teammates. There's a lot of moving parts to it, so I've done my best to break it down. Starting off, we've got that Devour buff from earlier. That's still the same. You get an ability kill or pick up an orb and bam. Full health activated with constant grenade regen and a counter that refreshes each time. Where we start to differ is that weapon synergy I mentioned. Because of our helmet, every Void weapon kill will give a stack of something called Death Throws, which is all about that grenade. Each stack gives an extra 50% faster regen and 20% damage to it. Maxing out at 5 stacks means you can have 2.5 times the grenades and double the damage throughout your gameplay. You're going to use scatter grenades because they deal all their damage at once, so they're like these mini nukes with that buff, and they're already on a pretty short cooldown. Something you need to remember on this is that the stacks come from Void weapon kills. As long as you get one before that 10-second timer is up, you'll be totally fine, and something that'll keep you at maximum stacks with ease is the Wavesplitter exotic. Each time you pick up an orb, not only do you get the benefits from Devour, but it's also going to proc the supercharged battery perk on Wavesplitter for 70% more damage. It makes the special weapon feel like a heavy, and not only that, if you shoot an enemy for 2 seconds, it also suppresses them. Another part to the build is that when you get your grenade kills, you're going to get volatile rounds on your Void weapons thanks to Echo of Instability. Why do we care about this? Well, it means your Wavesplitter will now work on anti-barrier champions. I also said at the beginning that you'd be buffing your teammates, right? So what do I mean by that? While Death Throws is active, you're getting a bunch of grenades, right? Well, each time you throw one of them, any nearby teammates get a buff on their screen called Feel the Flames. Regardless of what class they're on, it'll give them their own grenade back 10 times faster. To really let that sink in, if their grenade takes 40 seconds to charge normally, it's now going to take 4 seconds. You keep throwing grenades and they keep getting buffed. Extra damage for you, more grenades for them. This is largely why I've included this, because you might be thinking both these builds were void so far and around grenades. I personally like to run Contraverse if I'm solo, but Verity's is a dream when your buddies are also running it because you're all just buffing each other non-stop. Let's move on to another subclass though, with one of the most fun builds that shipped with Lightfall, Necrotic Grips with the Strand subclass. This one is wild when it comes to ad control, okay? So to start it out, you want to throw your melee at an enemy. That'll do a chunk of damage and unravel them. What does that mean? Well, it's basically a debuff, meaning as long as they're taking damage, they're going to be spitting out these green things. Those will then either damage them again or just hit another nearby target. The beauty around this is it can go on forever, so as long as that debuffed enemy keeps taking damage, they will continue spitting those out. Now this is where the Necrotic Grips come in with their exotic melee ability. Each hit applies a poison which deals damage over time that continues to ramp up and spreads to other enemies after the kill. The chain reaction can allow a single melee to do something like this. You'll see a similar effect in higher level content too, it just takes a bit longer because the Necrotic Grips damage has to ramp up over time. One more thing about that poison spread is that it also works with Weapons of Sorrow. As of today, that's the Osteostriga, Touch of Malice, and Thorn, which by the way, just got a big damage buff this season. Now a key to this build is Thread of Generation. Any damage you deal will give a portion of your grenade back and it has no cooldown. That's crucial because stuff that lets you stack a bunch of damage ticks over time are really good for it. Since you'll be using the Shackle Grenade, that means you're getting constant access to Suspend, and it gets even crazier when you eat the grenade by holding down the button instead of throwing it. When you do that, it gives you a buff called Weaver's Trance, and now anything that you kill will suspend enemies around them for the whole time that you have that buff active. It's kinda nuts and feels like overkill sometimes because the game practically plays it for you. Another quick tip though is that throwing tangles will also suspend, which those will then give you huge chunks of your melee back as well. And the last thing I gotta mention is Woven Mail after picking up an orb thanks to Thread of Warding. Right now that provides a 60% damage resist while it's active for those 10 seconds and it's refreshable. It makes a lot of content way easier, and I mentioned Shoot to Loot earlier, right, as a cool weapon perk? So just remember it allows you to pick up those orbs at range, which in turn gives you Woven Mail for days. Next up are the Getaway artists on the Arc subclass, and these do something that no other exotic can do: Amplified on Demand. With that ability offering so many good things, you first need to understand how we get there, so this build revolves all around the Arc Souls aspect. Forgetting about the exotic for a moment, when someone has this aspect on, their rift is going to give an Arc Soul to anyone who stands in it. They can leave and come back, refreshing the timer. It's a wonderful thing. The Arc Souls hover over your shoulder and shoot at anything within line of sight. When you're amplified, they start to shoot way faster. This becomes a powerful tool for aggressive gameplay and exactly where the exotic comes in. The Getaways make it so that whenever you eat your grenade, that'll summon a sentient Arc Soul. No rift needed, just on command. We're going to call that sentient Arc Soul Terry for simplicity. Not only does Terry fire even faster than the others, each time he tags an enemy, you're going to get some grenade back. Many people's first instinct is that because of the 20-second timer, you hang on to your grenade to keep that cycle going, but you don't need to. Terry can be extended very easily, meaning you can still use your grenades for damage too. Simply step into a rift and your timer goes back to max. It allows you to dip in and out, refreshing it constantly. What this ultimately means is that you eat your grenade, go do your thing for a while, and then when your timer is getting low, just pop a rift down, and just like that, you've had Terry by your side for a full minute. There's just one catch I need you to be aware of. If you happen to enter a rift before activating Terry, you end up with just the basic Arc Soul. Eating your grenade after the case will not override it, so in general, you just want to try and always get Terry going first. Now I mentioned Amplified at the start and how special it is that we can get it on command, right? So let's take a look at why that's such a big deal. First off, you instantly get 50 mobility, a longer slide, and 40 handling for all of your weapons. That means you cover ground way quicker, it's easier to make big jumps, and your weapons just feel a heck of a lot better. Second is that after sprinting for a moment, you get a buff called Speed Booster. This not only makes you run faster, of course, but it even gives you longer slides, more jump height, and extra damage resist. Movement is also something I think people hugely underrate in PvE. It can play a big role in the game's shooting patterns, and you'll find yourself taking way less damage. We use Spark of Beacons so that while you're amplified, killing enemies with an arc weapon will make them explode and blind others around them. This is huge for fast gameplay, and there's one more thing to mention, which are these things called ionic traces on the ground. Killing those blinded enemies or anyone jolted by abilities will create those beams of light that track back to you. Those ionic traces give you chunks of your energy back on everything. Collect enough of them and they convert into armor charges thanks to the elemental mod, which opens the door to our weapons. Using surge mods on your boots thanks to having armor charges can make your arc weapons even stronger and keep the loop going seamlessly. Now that was a lot of info because arc is super intricate, but let's just say you wanted to use this as like an anchor, like a tank, let's say. Well, that brings us to build number 5, which is running the Vesper of Radius exotic. Even though it's older, a bunch of exotics got reworked in Season 21, and this one may have gotten the craziest of them all. There's a lot to unpack there, but the main buff is that now your Rift can blind enemies. I could not believe how much easier it made Grandmaster Nightfalls. You find a bit of cover, drop a healing rift, and 1 second later it sends out a shockwave. That thing will blind everything nearby, knock them back, and even deal some damage. So you're constantly healing, all the enemies around you are blind, and these shockwaves are going out every 5 seconds. Then if that wasn't enough, anything that dies to it will also explode and apply another blind to the rest of their surrounding enemies. Basically, dropping these rifts give you some really nice breathing room, and arc kills in the background make you amplified. We've already touched on that topic, but here it means you can focus on main enemies like champions without getting sidelined by those annoying dregs stabbing you in the back. Another bonus is when you're near at least 3 enemies, your rift energy charges a heck of a lot faster. And not just some small amount, I'm talking 1500% faster if you're near a bunch of them. Since we love our Rift so much, you'll be using mods like Bomber and Dynamo to give you chunks of energy every time you place it. And this build is so nice because you can pop Chaos Reaches like nobody's business. Now in the previous build, I used the word jolt for creating those ionic traces, right? Well, you're going to be using them here as well. The Spark of Shock fragment allows your grenades to jolt targets, meaning you're going to see those ionic traces here as well, which help bring back all of your abilities. And staying on that topic for a second, any jolt damage you deal is also going to stun overload champions. That's your melee, grenade, and even Chaos Reach. The nerd in me needs to clarify one little thing here, and that's the fact that I specifically said jolt damage. If you go up to a champion and you melee them, it won't stun right away, and you might think, what the heck? That's because the stun function comes from dealing damage while they're jolted. Grenades are perfect for it because they jolt while continuing to deal damage, and they last long enough to even re-stun an overload. The final thing I'll mention is just to make sure that you've got at least one arc weapon, because getting kills with those make more of those traces, and multi-kills will make you amplified. Enough about arc though, let's move on to my Stasis Warlocks out there. The Mantle of Battleharmony makes Stasis an absolute hammer and provides massive weapon potential. Starting with its exotic perk, when you get a kill using a weapon that matches your subclass, in this case Stasis, you're going to get a buff called Energy Siphon for 2 seconds. Each time this happens, you get a bit of extra super energy. It's not a lot, but it really adds up over time. Once your super is full, those Stasis weapons now have a 25% damage buff. The cool thing here is that it stacks with other damage buffs like Rampage or even being Radiant. This leads to some synergies like Chain of Command rolling a damage perk with Adrenaline Junkie and then Grenade Regen in Demolitionist. Each kill gives it more and more damage from the perk and then stacks with the exotic while also giving you a ton of grenades. Another option, and probably my favorite, would be the Agger's Scepter. Again, because it's Stasis, we've got a buff right off the bat thanks to our exotic armor, but this thing will end up freezing enemies and even spreading that freeze thanks to the Ice Flare Bolts aspect. You'll be running Glacial Harvest, meaning all of those frozen targets will then make shards everywhere. They're going to track over to you, giving you health bumps as you play, or even an overshield if you're full HP. Thanks to the Elemental Charge mod on your legs, when you collect those shards, they're going to stack up into armor charges. We love those as usual because they fuel our Kickstart mod. Now just to circle back for a second, a tip with the Aggers, by the way, is that it's great for prepping a Stasis Heavy. If you pick off an enemy with the trace rifle first, that gets your 25% buff going for all stasis weapons, right? From the chest piece. Then you can swap to something high damage like a Reed's Regret or a Cold Comfort to take advantage of that. If those have a perk like Harmony or Bait and Switch that also add damage when swapping, you get this doubling effect, turning your heavy into that absolute hammer we talked about. If you don't have something like that, it's totally fine though, and worth checking if you have the Agger's Catalyst unlocked, because that lets you pile on a double damage perk as well, which also stacks with the chest piece buff. It's super underrated. Another reason why this build feels like a hammer is because of the Glacier Grenade. You throw it down and it blows up for a bunch of things. First is the damage it deals, of course, across the area, but it also spreads freeze, which leads to more shards, which lead to grenade energy back when you pick them up. In tougher content, it's also worth mentioning that you can use the Glacier Wall as portable cover. Thanks to the Whisper of Chains fragment, standing near crystals will give you 40% damage resist. Super fun build using stasis weapons in any activity, and finishing that off leaves us one more subclass, which is Solar. We're going to pair it with the Phoenix Protocol exotic to make the Well of Radiance actually fun, because we all know being the team's safety net can sometimes be boring. Today, you're going to learn how to turn that well into a weapon. With the Ember of Combustion fragment, every single solar kill from inside your well will ignite the enemy for huge damage. It allows you to clear a whole wave of adds in a single shot. Getting those kills with this exotic has a perfect harmony going on with your super because it gives you way more than you would originally. As long as you're inside the well, Phoenix Protocol will tack on extra super for every single kill until you're halfway. Bungie implemented a cap at that point, but you can just throw a grenade, and thanks to Ashes to Assets on your helmet, the rest can be done quite easily. Since those nades are solar, they're going to be igniting enemies and kicking in Ember of Blistering, which gives you grenade energy right back on all of those ignitions. Rinse and repeat, you get a ton of grenades and a ton of supers. So much so that with enough adds in the area, you can literally get your whole super back by yourself. With a gun like Xenophage, you drop almost anyone in a single shot, you chew through barrier champs thanks to the well making you radiant, and you can even stun unstoppables with your ignitions. This is achievable with any solar weapon, but hard-hitting ones like Xenophage, Ariana's Vow, LMGs, even Gallarhorn, they're just so good at this it's not even funny. With the Ember of Searing fragment, any scorch kills you get from everything being on fire will give you melee energy and creates these floating flames called fire sprites. Those things give you grenade energy and lead to more armor charges when picking them up all over the place. I'm sure you guessed it, but that happens thanks to the Elemental mod. And why do we like armor charges? Well, that's to feed Kickstart and Surges. Finally, to wrap this one up, you're going to run the Incinerator Snap melee, which will let you ignite enemies by landing all 5 of their sparks. Or, if you weren't aware, you can cause an ignition just by dealing splash damage at the floor right next to the enemy as well. All in all, the build is super strong and a nice variation to how most people would play their Well of Radiance, so if you happen to get stuck with it, try this out and have some fun stealing everyone else's kills. Now there is one more bonus build that you really should be aware of, and that's pairing Solar with the Sunbracers. It's probably the most complex of them all, so I actually made an entire video covering that one alone. From infinite grenades to infinite health, this thumbnail will bring you right there and walk you through exactly how to use it. Cheers.